fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. Got my hat backwards. Feeling good here today. Got a special guest. Who do we got?
What's up, guys? Tony Acevedo here.
Like avocado?
Like avocado.
Tony, welcome back to the show, brother. Luke is not going to be with us. He's got all kinds of stuff on his plate. Those of you who don't know, we blasted through, I think we're at 12,500 insider members. It is exploding. Captain Tom Ray, who's one of our members, had sent me an email. This was Sunday night. We sent our newsletter out, and we actually put a list welcoming all new members. And the thing, like, you're going to get carpal tunnel scrolling. It would just kept going and going. He's like, oh my gosh, you guys had hundreds of new members join in the past week, and we did. So I want to thank all of you who are members who are currently listening. We can't do it without you. It's how we keep this entire platform sponsor-free and ad-free. And the sponsor-free is so critical, because if you've been in the fishing world at all for any amount of time, you know that there's a ton of talking heads that are continually just pushing whatever the sponsors, tell them to do. And I get it, and I'm fine with it. However, I personally like to know what's actually working right now and what's the best piece of equipment, lure, braid, whatever it might be, that truly worked, not what someone was paid. So that was like a big promise and really a vow that we made to our audience day one, is that we are going to say no to every single sponsor. Cool part is, though, for you insiders that know about this, and for you brand new insiders might even not know a lot about what's going on behind the scenes, but because we're now over 12,000 members, we've had a lot of these big manufacturers, some of the bigger rod reel manufacturers, some of the bigger distributors reaching out to us, asking if they could sponsor us. Of course, we say no, but we say, hey, do you mind sponsoring our members? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, instead of giving us money or tackle or whatever it is, let's give our members that benefit, regardless if you fish with, pin reels or Daiwa or Shimano, so we can cover the whole gamut. So now, and it should be, a lot of it's there, but like in the next 30 to 40 days, it is going to be next level discounts across the board on every major brand that you've ever seen, just for our insider members. I can't tell you exactly what the numbers are because it's so good. We can't talk about it all publicly just yet, but let's just say it is going to be massive. So just one more reason to join the club. Now, this week's, or today's, because we do multiple a week podcast, Tony brought this up to me, and it's all about transitioning from being a bass angler to an inshore saltwater angler. There are a lot of similarities. There are also quite a few really big differences. And I know, Tony, you've got an amazing story, which we're going to talk about. And in looking back at all the guests we've had on the show, we're at episode 180 something now. And it seems like 90% of the guests who, especially if they're into saltwater fishing now, started off in bass fishing. And it might even be almost 100. It was like very rare to hear someone say, oh yeah, I skipped the pan fishing and skipped catching bluegill and brim and bass, and then all of a sudden just went to saltwater one day. It seems like most of them started there. And so let's talk about your story. I mean, you're Orlando, kind of landlocked, and you were a bass guy.
Yeah, started out bass fishing. Kind of played around a little bit with inshore when I was a kid. Going to bridges and piers and stuff with my dad, throwing out shrimp, catching whatever would eat it.
Shrimp!
It was usually pinfish or pufferfish or catfish, but it was still fun as a kid.
Yeah.
But bass fishing was definitely my go-to. Really got big into it when I was a teenager because I was just more mobile. I can go out on my own, drive around, and had a little metal John boat back then. It was like a 14-foot John boat. Started taking that out to the lakes and got hooked on that. Then I met a guy when I was fishing a pond one day, and he asked me just out of the blue, hey, you want to come fish tournaments with me? He had a really nice bass boat, 20 foot, 200 horsepower, all the bells and whistles. And he invited me out on it one day, and we went out. First day he took me bass fishing and caught an 8.2 pound bass.
Dang.
But I think that jinxed the tournaments that we fished because we did pretty bad in the tournaments. But yeah, bass fishing is how it all started.
And obviously, if you're doing tournaments, you were good, right? I mean, if you have enough confidence to do that, you weren't just some guy that could go out there and catch a bass every once in a while. Did you feel like you had it dialed in?
Yeah, I mean, we were out on the water a few times a week and pretty much every weekend. And when you do that, you get used to what's going on. You figure out where the fish are holding,
yep,
and just go from there.
All right, so you're into bass, and then what happened? Why did you decide to try inshore fishing, saltwater fishing?
It always sparked my curiosity, but I had this like preconceived notion that inshore fishing was so expensive and it was super tough to do. You know, you need a $80,000 flats boat to do it. But I ended up buying a kayak one day, saw one on sale. It's like, sure, why not? Let me try this out.
How much did you pay? Do you remember?
It was like $400. It was really cheap, but it got me on the water. You know, it definitely helped out keeping you off the shoreline. You know, not a lot of places you can fish from the shoreline, and just having something you can float on to get out on the water definitely helped and expanded things from there.
So were you going over to Titusville?
Yep. I live in Orlando. Titusville is the closest body of water there. Indian River, Mosquito Lagoon.
So as the legend goes, you struggled in the beginning.
Yep. I had a tough time. I caught trout. You know, I was using my old bass fishing gear, and that's a big question people ask me. You know, if I start inshore fishing, do I have to buy all new equipment? When you're first starting out, I would say no, you don't have to, as long as you take care of your stuff. You know, rinse your reels off, rinse your rods off, wipe them dry at the end of the trip. You can even use the same lures. You know, bass fishing lures are very similar to saltwater fishing lures. The only thing that might be different is, you know, the scent or the size profile. But what really matters is just being in the right place at the right time when it comes down to it. And if you're throwing a bass lure or saltwater lure, those fish don't really care too much.
Did you know enough to use a leader in saltwater, or were you already doing some of that in freshwater?
I did. I heard, you know, when I first started, everybody was talking about, oh, you have to use leader. And when I bass fished, I never used leader. I just tied straight to the braid because bass, you know, they jump a couple times and that's about it. And if you're fishing in heavy cover, you want to use that heavy braid, you know, to cut through the lily pads and the grass. There's not really, you know, rocks or anything like that where I bass fish. So didn't really need leader for abrasion resistance or shock resistance, really.
So yeah, because I remember, gosh, I was probably 10 or 12 when we really started doing the inshore side of things, and we were bass guys from Winter Haven, Florida, and that was like, wow, you got to use all this fancy leader stuff. Andy Mono back in the day, still obviously great brand, but yeah, it was that's interesting. So keep talking about this. So you're making the trek over. Are you catching anything at all?
I was catching trout. I was using, I think one of the first lures I was using was like a Zoom Super Fluke. That was basically what I was using for bass fishing all the time. That was my go-to. And I was catching a bunch of trout on it. I was thinking, okay. I was able to catch those, but every trip, you know, I was going to the same spot over and over again. Which doesn't work for inshore. If you're bass fishing, it usually works because bass will hold in a certain area for an extended amount of time just because there's so much structure out there. But with inshore, you know, fish are constantly on the move, and I was struggling just trying to figure out where they were at, especially redfish. That was the one fish I really wanted to catch, and I was having a tough time finding them.
Yeah, I mean, and depending on where you live too, you know, there's areas like where my wife's family from in Savannah. I mean, you could have a 7-foot swing in the tide, you know, meaning, you know, those fish are moving every single day. And in freshwater, I think that's, you know, that's definitely a big thing to get used to, is understanding tides, the importance of tides, when the feeding times are around those tides. Do you mind talking about that in terms of, you know, knowing what you know now, things that you wish someone had told you back when you were doing that transition?
Yeah, I mean, when I started inshore fishing, I realized fish are a lot shallower than bass, and because of that, they're more affected by the changes in the environment, like the tide swings, the weather. If the sun's really bright or if it's a cloudy day, I found that inshore fish definitely respond to that more than bass do. Bass are typically holding in grass patches. If it's bright and sunny out, they'll just move into the grass. If it's cloudy, they may move out to the edge of the grass. But there's no changing water levels in lakes unless you're fishing a lake that's controlled by a lock. Maybe in the summertime there might be less water. In the wintertime there might be more water in the lake, so that'll push fish into different areas. But for the most part, inshore fishing, those fish are constantly on the move, constantly looking for food. Different times of the year the forage changes, so their diet changes, so they're going to be looking for different food throughout the year. So they may be in one area one time of the year, or maybe even one area one time of the day, and move to another area later on in the day. So inshore fish definitely are on the move compared to bass.
So when you say shallower, talk about what you mean by that. Are you catching a lot of yours in a foot of water? A lot of your fish now?
Yeah, when I started figuring out redfish, what really clicked was that those fish will literally swim in like 4 inches of water. I was fishing way too deep for redfish. That's why I was mainly catching trout. Most of us, if you fish for trout, you usually catch them in like 2 feet to 5 feet of water. That seems to be their sweet spot. And then redfish, I found, is a lot shallower than that. They're scavengers. Trout are more like an ambush predator. Bass are like ambush predators as well, so they hold on structure a little bit more than I would say redfish do. They're more of a, I guess you would say, scavenger. They're pretty much just swimming around looking for food, especially in the shallows, like crabs and crustaceans and all those easy food items for them.
So talk about, I'm going to go back to equipment, because you touched on it. What didn't work from the bass world?
From the bass world, 30-pound braid didn't work.
What about 50-pound braid?
Nope, that didn't work either. That was a big difference. I went from using 30, 40-pound braid on my rods and reels to 10-pound braid. And I just find it funny because you're fighting much stronger fish and much bigger fish inshore. And then when you're fishing for bass, you're using this really heavy line for a 3-pound fish.
Yeah.
That was a big change. Then the equipment over time definitely changed, just because it just wouldn't hold up to the saltwater. You want to find something that's a reel that's sealed and corrosion resistant. Also, the components on a rod, you want to be corrosion resistant. Doesn't matter how many times you clean them. Over time, they're just going to start falling apart. So did have to upgrade the equipment after that.
And what do you fish with now? What's your go-to rod, reel?
Rods, I have a whole variety of rods. I pretty much just go to the store, pick one up, see how it feels. If it feels good, I'll buy it. It could be $50. It can be, $500. I've got most of the rods I use are All-Star. They're sold at Academy Sports and Outdoors. All-Star Inshore Classic rods are like $50, but they last forever. Just because they do have those, corrosion resistant components. Also have a custom rod that I just got from Black Pelican Custom Rods. That's a really expensive rod, but it just ranges as long as it has that, corrosion resistance, holds up to the salt well. I'll use it. Doesn't matter if it's $50 or $600.
Yeah, that was a good podcast with the Black Pelican that we had. And what about the reels?
Reels, I really like the Shimano Naski. It's sort of the entry-level saltwater reel from Shimano. It's held. I've dunked that reel I don't know how many times, and it's still smooth. It goes for about $100. And then I recently just started getting into the Stratics. The Stratic FL, I just got 2 of those, trying those out. Was using a CI4 Plus. Actually wasn't too happy with that. The bearings would go bad. It just wasn't smooth, in my opinion. And that $100 Naski it's holding up way better than that CI4 was. So,
Wow. Yeah.
again,
And the CI4 is like 200.
yeah, 220, 229.
Yeah. Or if you're an insider member, you get a little bit cheaper, but
Yeah, definitely do.
and I know we have the, all the Shimano, the Nasky, and
Yeah, the Nasky,
we have
the
all that on.
Stratic,
Yep.
CI4 FL, all of them.
Love it. And what about lures? What's kind of your favorite lure that you were using in freshwater that also works in saltwater, or lures?
Like I said before, the Zoom Super Fluke, that's what I was catching a lot of trout on. And then a topwater Head and Super Spook Junior in the bone color. That's something I caught a ton of bass on in freshwater. And also in saltwater works awesome for snook, redfish, trout. Same color, that bone color, either bone, just straight bone color, or bone silver works really good.
Yep.
Those are probably the two lures that easily go from freshwater to saltwater.
Yeah, I agree. You know, ironically, you and I both live, closer to freshwater, and so I'm doing both every week. And I still use that Zoom Super Fluke Arkansas Shiner color.
Yep.
Thing just keeps working.
Sure
I don't have as much luck with it in saltwater. I don't know, just because maybe it's the confidence, in terms of, I've been using the Slam Shady paddle tail for 6 months now, nonstop. And I feel like that's just what I always go with. But yeah, man, that Super Fluke, or any kind of fluke like that works. We need to come up with a scented fluke. So, man, I still think one of the best ones is, meaning if I'm fishing a tournament, you had to use a fluke to catch a fish. I mean, the Berkeley jerk shad. I mean, tough to beat that, but it gets annihilated, and you're paying $1 something a pop for them.
Yeah, it catches fish. I mean, that's probably now my number one confidence lure in saltwater. It has caught me pretty much every species that swims in saltwater. And it's very similar to the Super Fluke, like you said, but I don't know what they put in that scent. The redfish love it. You can cast it out there, let it sink down to the bottom, let it sit there, and a redfish will pick it up.
Dead sticking. We did that. You did that one video, right, on dead sticking? That was pretty funny.
Yeah. It was a 40 or 41 inch red. I saw him pass me by. I just threw it out behind me, let it sit down to the bottom, because I've been catching ladyfish. So I was trying to catch a ladyfish because I saw these reds. I was going to cut up the ladyfish to use for bait. Turns out I look over and my rod's bent over with the Gulp jerk shad that I just had sitting out there, 40 inch red on there.
Love it. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. All right, so let's keep going down the path of what worked for you. Obviously, you joined Salt Strong, and as just a normal customer, and eventually ended up joining us on the team. Talk about that, and talk about what else you were just learning along the way on this journey of conquering and becoming consistent at catching inshore saltwater fish.
I mean, a lot of time on the water is definitely key. You can hear a lot of stories about, fish are biting over here, they're hitting on this, but actually just being on the water is definitely going to help out. When I first started inshore fishing, I would bring my kayak with me to work and go fishing after work. That's how much I would try to get out on the water. Plus, back then we had the Strong Angler Challenge.
Yep.
And that definitely motivated me to get out there and catch more fish, just the competitive nature of it. And then once I caught that first redfish, after that, it was like I was hooked. just like when you're fishing for bass, that first bass you catch, you're hooked. You want to catch more, you want to catch bigger ones. And that just drives you to get out there and catch more fish.
Looking back, what were some of the big mistakes, though, in terms of, because it's cool to catch that first one, but it doesn't mean you're going to catch it every time you go out. Now I feel like, I know everyone still has slower days because it's just part of it, but you're pretty doggone consistent. What were some of the biggest mistakes looking back, besides going to the same spot over and over again?
Yeah, definitely that one, going to the same spot over and over again. Also, just not planning properly. You know, I used to just go on the maps. I would go online and just search, what's a good spot to go to. And something would pop up and I'd be like, okay, let me go there. I wouldn't do any research on it. I wouldn't look at the maps to see what's around there, what specific areas I should go to. Because you can get to a spot, those fish are only going to be holding probably, like we say, in 10% of that spot.
Yep.
90% of the fish are in 10% of the water. So if you're not actually analyzing an area and basing it off of the wind, the tide, what time of year it is, all the patterns and trends, you need to factor those in to have a productive day on the water. And I just wasn't doing that. I was basically just loading up the kayak. All right, I'm going to go over here, and then that was it, and see what happens. So that was probably the biggest mistake I made.
It's funny. We Luke and I did a inner circle for our insider inner circle call earlier, and that was really the path that we went down. There was a few people just having trouble. They felt like they were in a good area based on what you said. They looked at spot maps and they asked people, and it was supposed to be, hey, this area has fish, and yet they didn't look at anything else. And Luke was like, guys, like if you want to be consistent, you can't just have a spot. I mean, I can give you a ton of GPS spots, but they're not that good. Some of them are going to be great right now. Some of them are going to be horrible, but you need to know why. And it all boils down to those trends, weather, right? And you have tides. I mean, you have just real science and biology based on what these fish are doing and what kind of structure that they want to hold on to in different times of the year. And then you got the bait. You need to have all of that stuff. At least it doesn't mean you got to study 4 hours, right, the day before you go, but you at least have to be looking at that stuff, not just having one spot and going there and assuming you're going to catch fish. And I know Luke, he said the thing he does before anything else, at least right now in the wintertime, is wind. He's like, the whatever way the wind is going and how hard it's blowing, that's going to determine really where I go. And I think a lot of people like, what do you mean? And they were more wondering about water temperature. He's like, man, I don't even think the temperature gauge on my depth finder even works anymore. He's like, I don't use it. I don't even look at it. He's like, I'm trying to find the most warmest area relative to everything else, like right now in the wintertime, right? I'm trying to find, because these fish aren't like us. They can't regulate. They're cold-blooded. And he's like, I know they're going to be looking for the warmest area. That doesn't mean they're going to go 30 miles away. They're going to be in the same general vicinity. He's like, so I'm looking at the wind direction and then looking to find the places with the warmest water. And he's like, every time I do that, I usually catch fish, including, nice redfish, trout, and snook. And I think most people don't think like that. And I know that because I did that forever. I did the opposite. It was just like, oh, hey, man, I got my 5 spots. Let's just go hit them up and see which one is going to produce. And it's frustrating days.
Yep. And in the summertime and the wintertime, you have to think throughout the day, things warm up. In the summertime, you have to use that to your advantage to get on the water early instead of later, because things are cooler earlier in the morning in the summertime. And it's just the opposite in the wintertime. Things are warming up later in the day. So ideally, you want to get out there later in the day, find a wind protected area, dark bottom, something that's a little bit warmer. And like you said, water temperature, the exact temperature really doesn't matter too much. It's that change in temperature. Even if it rises or falls a degree or two, the wintertime, of course, you want it to be rising a degree or two, but summertime, if it's down a degree or two, like a rain shower comes through or something like that, that can definitely change things.
Yep. I'll tell you one advantage that the bass anglers have coming into inshore saltwater fishing is most bass guys know how to use a lure. And, we had Captain Mike Anderson on, who's got Real Animals TV. And at the very end, I was like, man, what's the best piece of advice that you could give to an inshore saltwater weekend warrior? And he without even hesitating, he's like, the number one piece of advice is understand and learn how to use artificial lures. He's like, what I see, especially in Tampa Bay, or really the whole state of Florida, is 90% of the people are using live bait. And I saw in a boating magazine just recently, they said it was like 68. It was basically 70% of the people they surveyed who have some type of bay boat or a saltwater inshore boat, that like 70% of them won't go fishing unless they have live bait. That's crazy. And so he's like, there's going to be days, especially in the wintertime, where you just can't find bait. No matter how good you are or how big your network is, there will be times you can't find bait. So one, obviously, if you don't know how to use anything with live bait, you're kind of screwed. But two, I mean, talk about the extra freedom it gives you to know that you can go out there after work, before the sun sets or on a lunch break with an artificial lure and catch fish. And I thought that was really interesting. And I do believe that's why a lot of bass guys like you, once you kind of get it and you can understand the trends, you join a club like our Insider Club and have that network and have access to the trends and what's working now. When you combine that with the ability to cast and skip cast, like a lot of bass anglers are great at, skipping underneath trees and limbs and docks, man, like it's actually a pretty big advantage when you actually know how to use a lure and a track to strike with a fake bait.
Yeah, those tactics and techniques definitely transition over. Like just I believe it was last week, I was fishing some docks, and that was like the first type of fishing I ever did for bass was skipping docks, Lake Conway over in Orlando, Florida, Belle Isle area.
Yep.
And it was just all docks, and we would just skip super flukes up under those docks. I got to the point where I was skipping it all the way up back, to the shoreline underneath the dock, and just getting good at those techniques. It will definitely transition over to, saltwater. And the trip last week, I was fishing some docks and I was skipping those lures under, and there was one dock holding like 3 or 4 redfish. Had one break me off at first, caught me by surprise, and then I was able to land 2 or 3 more. So if you can get better at casting lures, live bait, it can be good every now and then, but you're really at the mercy of the bait as opposed to you being in control of everything. So yeah, I definitely prefer artificials, but live bait does have its place.
Absolutely. However, especially if you're just getting into it like you did, and it seems like a lot of bass anglers, are starting in a kayak, because kayak fishing is exploding. It's a whole lot easier when you know how to use artificial lure, because keeping live bait and catching live bait in the kayak, and I know you've done it. We've done some videos on it, but man, to me, that's so much work.
Yeah, I was going to say that you save so much time too with artificial lures. You have everything at home in your box, ready to go. All you have to do is load up, go straight to the water. You don't have to worry about if the bait shop has this in stock or where the bait's at, where to catch the bait. Just saves a bunch of time.
Cool, brother. What else? Any other big aha ideas, mistakes, things that you wish someone had shared with you?
I think with bass fishing, you don't do much sight fishing, and that was a big kind of aha moment for me too. With inshore fishing, a lot of it you can do by sight fishing just because these fish are very shallow, especially in the wintertime, later in the day. The wintertime water clarity is usually a little bit better, more clear, because you don't get a lot of water runoff, you don't have a lot of rainfall, so things aren't stirring up the water. So that could be a good time to sight fish, but that was a big aha moment. The first time I actually caught a fish sight fishing, after that was like the only thing I ever wanted to do. So, just cruising the shoreline, looking for movement. Even if you don't see the fish, if you see a piece of structure that looks like it's holding a fish, it looks good. If you cast to that, you can almost, call it, say, there's going to be a fish there. Let me cast there. Then boom, you hook up. So sight fishing is not only just about seeing the actual fish. It's that if you see a wake or if you see a good piece of structure, it's not like bass fishing where you have a massive amount of grass and lily pads and you pitch into this hole and that hole, and you don't know when you're going to get a strike. Yeah.
And speaking of that, I mean, that is one similar notion is structure, right? I mean, optimize the structure, usually optimize the amount of predator fish you're going to find in there and strikes. And then, bait, we talk about the 3 Bs all the time, especially to our insider members who join. We ask, hey, like, are you seeing the 3 Bs? Are you seeing birds? Are you seeing bait? And are you seeing boils? And a boil is, a stir up of mud grass, just a boil on top of the water, or just, you know it when you see it, when you see something kind of dart off. And yeah, sometimes it's a stingray, and we talked about the difference between that and another podcast. But in many cases, if you see a boil or two, and you're seeing birds and bait, stop, slow down, be quiet. You're usually in a feeding zone. And then, you know, the final piece, of course, is to join the Insider Club. If you really want to leapfrog your friends and save years and years of time. I mean, Tony, you're a testament to, you know, what it can look like if you put a little time in, invest in yourself. And now we've got, you know, hundreds and thousands of you know, testimonials just like yours of just, guys, thank you. Like, this is what I've been looking for. And we really built it because we've been there. Like, we were bass guys. We struggled. We had 10 years of, kind of like you, we were catching some fish. Like, we were good, but we wanted to be great. We wanted to be consistent, right? Like,
yeah.
And especially as we got older and all of a sudden college was done and we had to get real jobs, we're like, man, like, I want to maximize this time. You don't realize how valuable your time is until you get a little bit older. Now I got wife and kids, and I really realize how valuable my fishing time is. And the last thing I want to do is sitting there picking my nose, wondering where the heck I should go. I mean, I want to fish with confidence, and I'm still learning every day. And that's why I get giddy about this Insider Club, all the stuff that we're putting out there, and learning new tips and tactics and shortcuts pretty much every single day. So join us there. If you guys haven't joined, just go to saltstrong.com. You'll see a special offer we have going right now. And we'd love to have you in there. It comes with a 365-day, 100% money-back guarantee. And the promise is, after a year, if you ain't catching more fish than you ever have in your life, and you haven't met some friends through the community, and you're not having more fun, then you don't pay. That's simple. And we have probably, 2% of people ask for their money back for whatever reason. We had one dude, it was like day 300 and something. And he sent us an email, and he's like, man, I really love you guys. I've learned a lot. I'm actually catching more fish, but I'm going through a really tough time financially. Can you guys give me the money back? And I want to join back later. And we did it, day 320. And I hope to see him back. But either way, it's our promise. No questions asked. We give the money back. And don't you wish all companies did that? And we have amazing people like Tony. Tony is one of our full-time fishing coaches in there now. And, man, that community, so much fun. I love going through there and seeing everybody's fishing reports. So we got regional reports from really Texas all the way up to New Jersey now is like the main area. And there are new reports going up every 20 minutes or so. Certainly multiple per hour. It's been pretty cool to see this thing grow and take off.
Yeah, I think back when I joined in what was it, 2015, we had, what were you guys posting, like one video every other week?
Probably.
Something like that.
Yeah.
There's no community. There really wasn't much aside from a video every now and then. So yeah, if it had if it had back then what it has now, I can only imagine.
Yeah. Well, we're improving every single week, every month, every year. Yeah, it's crazy how far it's come. And now there's, who knows, over 1,000 videos and all these mini courses. Actually, right before we got on here, Captain Peter Deeks, who's one of our other fishing coaches, he is more on that live bait side. And he's really going after those giant fish. We call him the elephant hunter. And he just told me he posted a new mini course. So I know, Tony, we'll have to go check it out. Should be in our little Dropbox account. So I'm excited to see that. But guys, thank you so much. If you are a bass angler, and once again, you want to join a community of people that get you, have been in your shoes, and just want to help you succeed and really shave off years of the learning curve, go to saltstrong.com and join us there. If you're already a member, I ask of you just this one thing, and that's please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to the podcast. Or if you're on YouTube, subscribe there as well. Give it a like. You guys are awesome. We will see you on the next episode. We be out.
Later, guys.
Thanks, Tony. Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was pain.